The hum of the fluorescent light above Erin's glass wall is the only honest sound in the room. Everything else, the nods, the chin tilts, the phrases about budget headwinds, feels staged, like we're rehearsing a scene she's been dying to deliver. She folds her hands on a legal pad with nothing written on it and says my name with that careful HR sugar that coats a bruise before it lands. Lena, I fought for you, I really did. But this cycle we had to prioritize impact roles. Impact roles. I let the words drift past the fern in the corner and settle on the radiator's soft click. This is year 4. Year 4 of doing the projections, closing the compliance loops, aligning our procedures to a merger no one will admit is already in motion. Year 4 of being graded exceeds while my pay sits perfectly still, like a museum exhibit you're allowed to admire but not touch. What changed? I ask, because it's the line I wrote for other people to use, the one that keeps meetings tidy. She brightens, relieved to follow the script. Calibration, she says, as if the word is a lifeboat. The 9-box shifted after Q2. You're trending high performance, medium potential. Medium potential? She nods. Leadership wants to see executive presence, visibility. You do a lot of back end. She gestures vaguely, as if I am a pipe behind a wall. I watch her pen roll to the edge of the pad and stop. Erin, I say evenly, my comp ratio is 0.82. The band midpoint hasn't moved. My scope has doubled. She blinks twice, a metronome for discomfort. I know the policy, she says too quickly. So do I wrote it. Payband governance 3.4, revision owner Lena Marquez. I wrote the sentence she is violating now. Sustained performance at exceeds across 2 or more cycles requires a documented plan toward midpoint. I also wrote its twin, the one managers love to forget. Failure to progress within band triggers a variance review by compliance. She didn't request one. She never has. Budget. She repeats, softer. Next cycle, we revisit. This is the part where people get small. Nod, thank her, leave the room like you're apologizing for your own existence. I just watched the second hand on her wall clock step over the 12. Okay, I say, calm as a ledger line. Then let's align on documentation. Her smile freezes. She hates that word from me. But the files will have to match the meeting now, and paper is harder to charm than people. Of course, she says. I'll drop notes. I stand, and the chair legs whisper against the carpet. The hall smells like printer toner and lemon cleaner. Friday's smell. On my way back to my desk, someone laughs too loudly in sales. Someone else is microwaving fish. Every office has a scent that clings to your hair long after you've left. Ours is ambition and reheated choices. My screen wakes with the shy light of late afternoon. Slack pings line up like teeth. I ignore them. I open Workday, navigate the policies I know by muscle memory, comp bands, merit cycle guidance, termination procedures. My initials sit in the change log, over and over, tiny watermarks of the invisible work. E.M. On a new tab, I pull the report I built that finance always pretends not to use, the one that maps outcomes to policy adherence. I'm not angry. It's something colder. A quiet auditor inside me standing up from her chair. There's a soft knock on my partition. Zoya, our payroll analyst, leans in, eyes apologetic beneath perfect eyeliner. How'd it go? Budget, I say. She exhales. I'm sorry. You want coffee? No, thanks. I almost add, document your conversations today, but she already does. We both do. It's a language we learned sitting 2 floors below people who think memory is a strategy. When she's gone, I open the shared drive, policy, HR, active. and download the manual I wrote with a fevered kind of love 2 summers ago, when we were trying to make this place safe in the only way that endures. Words. Signed. Procedure 8.2 stares back. Termination for cause must be reviewed by the authoring compliance officer or delegate prior to execution. I remember the debate about that line. I remember the heat in the room, someone saying, "What if the author is the one being terminated?" and me answering, "Then the process protects the company from itself." A notification pops in the corner of my screen, company-wide. New opportunities, we're growing. I click without thinking, a reflex from years of shepherding postings through the system. The careers page loads, blue and harmless. The top listing has my title in it, wearing a mask. Senior Policy Operations Lead, Strategic. The description reads like a translation of my last year, with the verbs sharpened, and the salary band? Higher. Much higher. I scroll past the bullet points I could recite backwards. Owns HR policy lifecycle. Drafts, revises, and ensures procedural adherence across org. Partners with legal on audit responses. Designs compensation frameworks. Leads termination governance. The phrase that stops my breath is the last one. Immediate need. I press my thumb to the edge of my desk until the bone answers. Somewhere down the hall, a stapler misfires. On the pane behind me, my reflection looks composed, like a woman evaluating an expense line. I copy the posting into a PDF. Save to /personal/arc/recruiting/mirrorroll.pdf. Date stamp. Hash. Not because I plan to fight today, but because truth decays in the open air. You either salt it or you lose it. Slack pings again. The hashtag leaders channel. I'm still in it, for now. Aaron. Quick note, please route external offers through me before accepting. Loyalty matters. A small chorus of thumbs-up emojis follows, digital curtsies. My cursor hovers over the reply field and doesn't move. The room goes a degree colder. On another tab, I open my personal email and type a subject line I've never needed before. Exploring. Then I stop, close it. Not yet. There are steps. There is order. The policy says so. The posting refreshes and flickers for a second, as if someone is editing it live. A new sentence appears under Requirements. Experience authoring enterprise HR policy strongly preferred. I sit back. The hum of the fluorescent light above Aaron's office finds a twin above mine. 2 notes. 1 chord. I click Save Page As again. Same folder. Another timestamp. My hand is steady when I name the file. mirrorroll_v2-liveedit.pdf. Outside, the January sky is the color of copy paper. My calendar blocks the next hour for documentation. I don't change it. In the reflection on my screen, my face barely moves as I smile. Small. Private. A page turning in a binder no one remembers I keep. The first whisper came from finance. They never speak loudly, just slide numbers like secrets across digital hallways. A spreadsheet appeared in my inbox late one night, forwarded accidentally from an analyst I trained 3 years ago. Subject, Headcount Realignment, Phase 2. My name wasn't on it, but my role was. Policy Operations Lead, Legacy. A word that sounds like respect until you learn it really means obsolete. By morning, the air in the office had changed. You could smell it, like toner and dread. Conversations shortened, Slack statuses stayed green all night, little digital flares of fear. People started skipping lunch together. Even Aaron's heels stopped clicking as confidently down the corridor. No one said layoffs. They said optimization, streamlining, alignment. The same euphemisms I'd helped legal define to avoid triggering mandatory warn notifications. I'd built the damn framework that let management rename firings into strategy. Now I was standing inside my own system, and it was starting to close. I watched as small signs appeared, the subtle prelude to corporate extinction. HR's shared calendar went private. Job descriptions started changing mid-week. Then came the Monday morning silence. No meeting invites, no new approvals, no chatter. Just that eerie calm of an organization holding its breath before a purge. I kept mine, too. Instead of panicking, I opened my documentation folder, the quiet arc I'd built over the years. Meeting notes, policy drafts, time-stamped revisions, email trails, and metadata snapshots. It wasn't paranoia. It was preservation. That's the first thing you learn when you work in compliance. Truth expires fast unless you store it cold. At 10:02 a.m., my monitor blinked. Message from Aaron, direct. Lena, can we chat quick? Her quick messages always meant cleanup, not conversation. When I entered her office, she looked like someone rehearsing concern. There's been chatter, she started, about you interviewing externally. I blinked slowly, giving her enough silence to fill the room herself. You know how it looks, she continued. Leadership needs stability right now. Optics matter. Optics. Another policy word I'd defined for her. Perception of integrity as viewed by internal or external stakeholders. I almost laughed. I haven't broken any policy, I said. Technically, no, she replied. But I need to know where your head's at. There it was. The question she thought sounded human, but was actually a trap. HR doesn't ask questions to learn. They ask to document. My head's in compliance, I said, same as always. She nodded like that answered something, though we both knew it didn't. When I turned to leave, she added, just stay focused, okay? These things can escalate if they're misunderstood. That word, misunderstood, landed like a fingerprint on glass. I walked back to my desk and found 2 colleagues pretending not to look at me. The whisper network was already running. Someone had mentioned the conversation before the door even closed. Corporate telepathy. Fast, invisible, precise. By noon, a junior analyst from legal pinged me privately. FYI, rumor says your role's under transition consideration. Be careful. Transition consideration. I had coined that term myself, too. It's what you use when you don't want to say, next in line. At 3:47, I opened the internal audit dashboard. Access I still technically held. There it was, under pending reviews. Termination Protocol 8.2. Draft version in circulation. Date modified. Yesterday. Author, Erin Whitmore. She was rewriting my clause. The one that required my verification before any firing could be executed. The system still showed my name on the current approved version, active, locked, binding. But she was building a new one in the sandbox, probably with legal's quiet blessing. I sat back, let the reality settle like ink. She wasn't just removing me from meetings. She was trying to erase my authority from the system entirely. I opened a new note in my private drive. Title, 8.2 Revision, Unauthorized Activity. Underneath, I wrote only this. If a policy is being rewritten without compliance oversight, it's not a policy. It's a cover-up. Then I exported a full changelog report, every edit, every timestamp, every unauthorized login, saved it to a secure folder. At 5:01 p.m., the office started emptying, but I stayed. The air cooled. The lights dimmed to motion sensor gray. The silence was almost kind. On the window's reflection, I saw myself, tired, calm, still holding the one thing they didn't understand mattered more than titles or raises: documentation. That's when Zoya messaged again. Heard Aaron's been meeting privately with legal. Careful, Lena. I typed back, thanks. I'm documenting. She reacted with a single emoji, the lock. As I packed my bag, I thought of the first day I joined this company, fresh out of grad school, believing rules existed to protect people. Years later, I knew better. Rules protect whoever can prove they followed them. And I had proof. When I turned off my monitor, the screen flickered one last time. The job listing still open in the browser. Same title, same duties. The only change was the line now added to the bottom. Start date, immediate. A small, cold smile found its way across my face. Immediate, I thought. So am I. And as the office lights dimmed completely, I whispered to the empty room, if you're going to rewrite the rules, Aaron, you should remember who wrote the originals. Then I walked out, my badge light blinking green. Still active. For now. The email arrived at 7:59 a.m., precisely 1 minute before I logged in. Subject: Mid-year calibration discussion. Mandatory attendance. It was the kind of calendar invite that carried no emotion, just the quiet precision of a firing squad's drumbeat. I clicked accept. The meeting was set for noon, right before lunch, the corporate hour for humiliation. People are hungriest then, less likely to defend anyone but themselves. When I walked into the conference room, the air smelled like burnt coffee and cold ambition. Aaron sat at the head of the table, legal's HR liaison beside her, and my direct manager, if you could call him that, across from me, fiddling with his Apple Watch as if it could teleport him out of discomfort. Let's make this a constructive conversation, Aaron began, her tone laminated with empathy. We want to ensure alignment. 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 A word that means we've already decided, and now we just need your agreement. She pulled up a slide deck titled Performance Trajectory, Policy Operations. I didn't need to see it. I knew the structure. Green bars for team metrics, yellow for development opportunities, red for cultural misalignment. And there it was, my section, glowing yellow-red. Lena, she said, folding her hands, we've noticed some changes in your engagement. You've been quieter, less collaborative. There are also concerns about outside activities. I kept my face neutral. Outside activities? Her eyes flicked briefly to legal, then back to me. Job hunting, potentially. A few cross-department comments raised flags. You know how these things spread. Rumors, I said. Perception matters, she replied. When leadership senses disengagement, it becomes a risk to morale. The irony almost made me smile. I was the one who had authored the employee morale risk assessment policy 2 years ago, the same one they were now trying to weaponize against me. I remembered the line exactly. Perceived disengagement shall not constitute a performance deficiency without documented evidence of neglect of duty. So I asked, calmly, is there documented evidence of neglect? The room went still. Legal glanced down, avoiding my eyes. Erin shifted papers like she was searching for something that wasn't there. Lena, she said finally, this isn't adversarial. We're just opening a dialogue. Then why is legal here? Her smile cracked for the briefest moment. Standard process. Standard process for what? I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she clicked to the next slide. A line graph appeared. My name at the top, a gentle downward slope labeled Perceived Engagement Index. Perceived, I said quietly. That's an interesting word choice. No one responded. After a long pause, I closed my notebook, deliberately. The sound was small but heavy. "If this is a calibration," I said, "then I'll need a copy of the official review form for records." Erin's smile faltered. "Of course. We'll send the finalized version after feedback consolidation." Meaning never. I stood. "Then I'll consider this an informal discussion, not a performance record, until it's documented." Her lips parted to argue, but I was already walking toward the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't even glance back. My restraint was the only rebellion I had left that didn't violate policy. When I returned to my desk, my inbox was already lighting up. Slack pings, DMs, a few nervous, "Are you okay?" messages from colleagues who'd been in that room before me and survived by staying silent. I typed a short reply to one of them. "Fine, documenting." Then I opened my private archive. I added a new folder, /performance review _informal. Inside it, I saved a memo. "Meeting held without prior documentation or formal notice. Legal present. Discussion included non-evidenced behavioral claims. No performance data presented. Non-compliant per Policy 5.1, Employee Review Standards. Timestamped, encrypted, filed." At 4:12 p.m., Zoya stopped by my desk, eyes darting nervously toward Erin's office. "She's been in meetings all day," she whispered. "With legal. Something about containment." "Containment?" Her word, not mine. I nodded slowly. "Thank you." When she left, I opened the company directory and checked permissions. My access to the compliance SharePoint had been temporarily disabled pending reauthorization. So it had begun. The quiet dismantling of my digital presence. But what Erin didn't understand was that access rights aren't ownership. The last backup I made was off-site, 2 weeks ago. Every revision, every policy version, every clause that tied her to a trail of procedural breaches. I minimized the window and stared at my reflection in the darkened monitor. Behind me, the office buzzed with the low murmur of people pretending to work or pretending not to know. In my inbox, a new message popped up. From internal comms, subject, Team Celebration, New Policy Alignment Initiative. The attachment? A draft of the very manual I had authored, now renamed version 4.0 with the author line blank. They were erasing me in real time. I leaned back, exhaling through my nose, the way you do before making a final move in a chess match. I wasn't angry, just precise. There's a moment every professional woman learns. The point when you realize they're not asking you to collaborate. They're asking you to disappear quietly. I smiled faintly at the monitor and whispered, "Not yet." Then I began drafting a single email, not to HR, not to legal, to myself. Subject: Chronology of Retaliatory Action, Draft 1. And as I started typing, the quiet in my chest turned into something else. Not fear. Strategy. It happened on a Friday. They always choose Fridays. Not because it's easier for them, though it is, but because it's harder for you. HR thinks the weekend softens the blow. No one to talk to, no office to return to, no witnesses left when your badge stops working. Just the quiet hum of your refrigerator and the echo of the words, "We've decided to move in a different direction." I'd already packed my desk before it happened, not out of defeat, but anticipation. Every mug, every file, every fountain pen that had written a clause capable of sinking a ship. They were tucked neatly into one box beside my chair, sealed with the same precision I used on audit reports. At 4:17 p.m., my phone rang. Erin. "Hey, Lena," she said, voice too light, the tone people use before delivering anesthesia. Do you have a quick minute to pop into my office? Pop in. I almost laughed. The words people choose when they're about to detonate someone else's livelihood. Inside, the blinds were half drawn. Legal wasn't there this time. HR wasn't either. Just her, the glow of her monitor, and a printed document face down on the desk between us. She gestured to the chair. Close the door? I did, slowly. Listen, she began, folding her hands as if we were about to pray. This isn't easy, but leadership feels your recent disengagement has created instability in the team. I didn't move, didn't even blink. You've been a tremendous asset, she continued, but after much discussion, we've decided to separate effective immediately. There it was, separate, the gentlest word in the HR euthanasia vocabulary. She flipped the paper around and slid it toward me. The letterhead was wrong, a template not from legal but from an older archive. Unregistered, non-compliant. I recognized it instantly. It was one of my early drafts from before the last policy update. Do you have an HR rep present? I asked. Her jaw tightened. Not necessary. This is straightforward. That's not what Policy 8.2 says. She hesitated. Which policy? The one I wrote. Her cheeks flushed. Lena, let's not make this difficult. I leaned forward, reading the document in silence. No compliance verification, no review signature, no justification code. It was, in every measurable way, a violation of the company's own termination protocol. Would you mind if I keep this copy? I asked. She blinked. It's already uploaded to your employee file. I'm sure it is, I said, sliding it neatly into my folder. I stood, calm. I stood calm, measured. She misread it as surrender. Security will deactivate your access at 5, she said softly. So if you could, I know the drill. I picked up my box, turned toward the door, and paused. You know, I said without looking back, Policy 8.2 requires a compliance officer's review for any involuntary separation. That's me. I could feel her silence hit the air like a pulse. I'll make sure it's documented properly, I added, then walked out. The corridor was empty except for Zoya standing by the copier, wide-eyed. It's done, she mouthed. I nodded once. Effective immediately. She winced. They didn't even bring HR? No. Her gaze hardened. That's stupid. Correct, I said, stepping into the elevator. And verifiable. When the doors closed, I let the silence swallow me whole. No panic, no tears, just the rhythm of calculation. At home, I placed the termination letter on my kitchen table beside my laptop and poured a cup of tea. Steam fogged my glasses as I reread the document, every typo, every missing line, every procedural breach. At the bottom, the line meant to read approved by compliance was blank. Underneath, a faint placeholder. Signature TBD. TBD, to be determined. I smiled. That would do. I opened my encrypted drive, navigated to the folder I'd prepared weeks ago, /legalhold/termination_policy 8.2/. Inside, the original HR manual glowed like a silent witness, my name on the metadata, my initials stamped on every revision. I drafted a single email to General Counsel, subject line clinical and cold. Subject, procedural breach, termination policy 8.2 violation. Body, potential noncompliance in involuntary separation. Executed without required compliance sign-off. Relevant documentation attached. Requesting internal review per clause 10.3, audit escalation. No emotion, no accusation, just facts. Attachments, the manual, the letter, and the time-stamped metadata showing Erin's unauthorized edit attempt. I didn't copy her. Not yet. The email sent with a soft whoosh. The most satisfying sound in the world isn't revenge. It's delivery confirmation. Outside, the city lights flickered on like a silent audience. Somewhere, in an office that smelled of glass and ego, Erin probably believed she had ended a problem. She hadn't realized she'd just triggered a procedure. And procedures, unlike people, don't forget who wrote them. The weekend passed with that strange quiet that follows detonation. Nothing moves, but the air still hums. I spent Saturday morning walking along the river, phone on silent, mind unhurried. There's a clarity that arrives only after the world thinks you've been erased. By Monday at 7:42 a.m., the first reply landed in my inbox. From General Counsel, required General Counsel, to report, procedural breach, termination policy 8.2 violation. Body, acknowledged. Please confirm authorship of current HR policy version and attach documentation of your compliance role. The word acknowledged was enough. In legal tone, that single verb means, we've seen it, and it matters. I poured coffee, opened my archive, and compiled a dossier that could outlive the building itself. Every edit log, every approval trail, every policy version signed and dated. It wasn't emotional. It was archival. My name appeared in the metadata like a ghost watermark, layered beneath 4 years of her revisions. At 8:17, a second email came. Internal legal counsel looped in external auditors. Then a third. Subject, urgent, suspension of termination authorization pending review. The words had weight. Suspension meant Erin couldn't approve or finalize another termination until further notice. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Instead, I turned off my work laptop, still active, oddly, and opened the personal drive where I'd mirrored the files. Folder name, 8.2_proof. Subfolders labeled like clockwork. Authorship, revision history, legal chain, unauthorized access. Each contained evidence that Erin had not only fired me illegally, but also attempted to alter a federal compliance document without legal review, a breach that could cost the company millions in regulatory fines. By noon, the storm began to gather. Zoya texted, "They're auditing HR. Erin's office door is closed. Legal's in there." Then a second message. "They asked who wrote 8.2. I said your initials are still on the footer." I stared at the text for a long moment. Those 3 initials, E.M., printed at the bottom of every compliance page like quiet initials on a tombstone. At 12:47, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Lena Marquez?" a man's voice asked. "Yes. This is David Reyes, Internal Audit Division. We received documentation from you regarding Policy 8.2. Are you available for a statement today?" I almost smiled. "Of course," I said. We met in a quiet cafe downtown. He was polite, methodical, and already nervous. "We're just trying to clarify authorship and authorization," he said, sipping bad espresso. "Erin claims revisions were pre-approved under her tenure." "They weren't," I said. "Clause 8.2 hasn't been updated since I signed off in February 2 years ago. Here." I slid him a printed copy, the original, sealed in plastic with my ink signature and timestamp. His eyes widened. "You kept a physical?" "I keep everything." He nodded slowly, like a man realizing the ground beneath him wasn't solid anymore. "Do you understand the implications of this?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "She fired me using an unapproved document. That's procedural fraud." He exhaled. "This will trigger an immediate compliance review." "Good," I said simply, and gathered my coat. By the time I got home, my inbox was already alive again, messages forwarding, copying, and looping. I didn't open them. I just watched the notifications multiply like a pulse. Around 6, Zoya called. "You're trending," she whispered. "They've pulled your old manuals, the whole library. Aaron's name has been removed from the org chart temporarily." Temporarily. The word people use before permanently. "Thank you," I said. "Don't get involved." "I won't," she said. "But Lena, you really did it, didn't you?" I looked at the soft blue glow of my monitor, the folder labeled 8.2_proof, the quiet stack of signatures that could outlive anyone's title. "I just followed policy," I said. That night, a final email came in at 9:03 p.m. from General Counsel to Compliance Audit Team HR Leadership, CC Executive Board. Subject: Urgent. Review: Termination non-compliance. Body: Effective immediately. All terminations executed under unverified documentation are suspended pending review. Any personnel actions derived from unauthorized templates will be treated as potential compliance breaches under Policy 8.2. The original author of said policy, Ms. Lena Marquez, will provide expert verification. My coffee went cold beside me as I read the line twice. Expert verification. They had reinstated me without even realizing it. Across town, Erin was likely pacing her office, wondering how the trap she thought she set for me had snapped shut around her own ankle. And me? I wasn't celebrating. I was annotating, marking each email, each timestamp, each procedural correction like an archivist preserving a crime scene. Clause 8.2 wasn't just my protection anymore. It was a mirror, one she'd built her power against, never realizing who was reflected in the glass. By midnight, I closed the laptop, exhaled, and whispered into the quiet apartment. Policies don't protect people, Erin. They protect truth. And truth, when documented, always finds its way home. The first email came before sunrise. Subject: Immediate action required. Internal audit initiated. The header was red, corporate crimson, the color of emergencies and reputations on fire. By the time I poured my coffee, the story was already rippling through Slack. HR channels had gone silent. Legal ones were locked. Erin's calendar, usually a mosaic of confidence and control, was suddenly empty. They called the audit procedural review, but everyone knew what that meant. Someone important had broken something expensive. At 8:30 a.m., I received my formal request to participate as policy author and compliance expert. It was clinical, detached, like being asked to identify a body you'd already buried. I arrived at headquarters with no badge and no bitterness. The security guard recognized me, nodded once, and handed over a visitor tag. The elevator ride was quiet, just me, my reflection, and the strange calm that follows a well-documented storm. The conference room was full when I walked in. Legal counsel, internal audit, one external compliance advisor, and the CFO himself, the kind of man who smiled only when budgets screamed. Erin sat at the far end, pale, eyes rimmed with sleepless denial. "Ms. Marquez," the lead auditor greeted, standing halfway, "thank you for joining us. We understand you authored Policy 8.2. Yes. Would you be willing to walk us through the original process?" I placed the binder on the table, opened it to the page they feared most, the one that began, "All involuntary separations must be reviewed by the authoring compliance officer prior to execution." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Each word on that page was a blade honed long ago. Erin interrupted, brittle and sharp. The language was outdated. I initiated a revision to streamline procedure. The auditor adjusted his glasses. Was that revision approved? She hesitated. It was in progress. In progress, I repeated softly, yet used to terminate employment. The silence that followed could have cracked glass. I slid a printed copy of the termination letter across the table. This was the document I was given. It uses a non-compliant template, bypasses legal review, and carries no authorization signature. That alone triggers an internal audit under Clause 10.3. The CFO cleared his throat. And you submitted that report. I followed company policy. The auditor nodded slowly. For the record, the termination was unauthorized. All subsequent personnel actions under Ms. Whitmore's direction are therefore under review. Erin's face drained of color. "This is a misunderstanding," she whispered. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the document, my words printed in the same font she'd tried to overwrite. The meeting stretched for hours. They asked questions, I answered with evidence. Every timestamp, every revision trail, every metadata signature lined up like soldiers behind me. When it ended, the room felt smaller, the air heavier. The auditor closed his folder, exhaled, and said the sentence that changed everything. "Effective immediately, Ms. Marquez. Your termination is void. You remain an employee in good standing pending review." Erin inhaled sharply, but no one looked at her. The CFO added, "We'll also need your assistance correcting compliance gaps in HR. Consider this a temporary reinstatement." "Of course," I said. They dismissed us. Erin lingered, staring at me with a kind of brittle disbelief. "You planned this," she hissed, voice low enough to avoid the microphones. I met her eyes. "I wrote it." She blinked. "You think this makes you untouchable?" "No," I said, standing. "It just makes me right." Her mouth opened, maybe to argue, maybe to beg, but the auditors were already packing their folders. Outside, the hallway lights buzzed faintly overhead. I passed the glass wall of HR and saw people avoiding eye contact, pretending to be busy. Fear travels faster than gossip. At my old desk, someone had cleared the surface, wiped it clean, like I'd never been there. I stood for a moment, then opened my bag, took out a single plant I'd kept alive in my kitchen window, and set it down. A quiet reclaiming. Zoya appeared, breathless, whispering, "They've locked Erin's accounts. Legal found the draft she edited. The timestamp matches your termination date." I nodded. "Then the audit will find what it needs." She looked at me carefully. "You're really calm." "I've been living in documentation for years," I said. "You stop fearing storms when you know you built the shelter." By late afternoon, legal sent one more notice. Subject: compliance breach confirmed. Administrative leave pending review. Recipients: executive leadership HR. CC: me. The message was short, factual, devastating. I closed my laptop, stepped outside, and watched the sunset spill gold over the city, a color I hadn't seen properly in months. Erin had once said policies were just paper shields, but she never understood. Paper can cut deeper than steel when the words are true. The audit wasn't over, but the outcome was already written, and this time, I was the author and the witness. They called it a follow-up. That was the word on the calendar invite, though everyone knew what it really was. A reckoning wrapped in corporate language. The kind of meeting where careers ended with polite smiles and phrases like, "effective immediately." When I walked into the boardroom, the atmosphere was different this time. Quieter, cleaner. The blinds were open, light spilling across the long oak table where 4 executives sat in still formation. Legal, compliance, finance, and at the head, the CEO, Marcus Lang, a man who'd never learned to blink during bad news. Erin was already there, sitting opposite me. Her posture looked rehearsed, shoulders squared, jaw set, eyes swollen but dry. The audit had stripped her armor away. Now she sat with a single notepad and a bottle of water, like a defendant awaiting a verdict she already knew. "Let's begin," Marcus said. His voice had that sharp, efficient cadence of someone who'd spent a lifetime moderating damage rather than preventing it. "We're here to close out the findings from the Policy 8.2 review." The compliance director, a soft-spoken woman from legal I'd never met before, adjusted her glasses. "After full examination of the records, we've determined that the termination of Ms. Marquez was executed without legal authority. The documentation used was an outdated and unapproved template. Multiple process breaches were identified." She paused, looking down the table. "The origin of those documents traces directly to Ms. Whitmore's workstation." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like a sealed vault opening one hinge at a time. Erin's pen slipped from her fingers and rolled onto the table. "I was told," she began, voice cracking. Marcus raised a hand. "You were told nothing. You acted on your own, without counsel or compliance oversight." He turned to me. "Ms. Marquez, your documentation has been instrumental in clarifying this issue. The board appreciates your diligence." I nodded once. "I was just following procedure." "Exactly," he said, eyes landing back on Erin. "That's what leadership failed to do." The compliance director continued. "As a result, the company faces potential exposure for wrongful termination, documentation tampering, and non-compliance with internal audit regulations. We're mitigating that risk through immediate corrective action." Erin's breathing quickened. "What does that mean?" Marcus folded his hands. "It means your employment is terminated. This time, lawfully." For a moment, I thought she might argue. But then something inside her just deflated. The fight drained from her face like color rinsing out of a photograph. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, stood, and began gathering her things with trembling hands. Before leaving, she turned toward me. "You wanted this," she said, not as accusation, but as realization. "No," I replied softly. "I wanted fairness. You wrote your own ending." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't speak again. She walked out quietly. No dramatic exit, no slammed doors. Just the soft click of the latch closing behind her. When the door shut, Marcus exhaled through his nose, long and slow. "We'll issue a formal statement to staff by end of day. We want this handled cleanly." "Understood," I said. He leaned forward. "We'd also like to discuss reinstatement. Permanently, this time. Compliance needs leadership that knows the rules from the inside." The offer hung in the air like a contract without ink. I looked around the table. At the auditors, the lawyers, the executives who'd watched from the sidelines while Erin rewrote the playbook. "If I come back," I said carefully, "it's under one condition." Marcus nodded. "Name it." "That we stop treating compliance as punishment and start treating it as prevention." He studied me for a moment, then smiled. A small, tired smile that looked almost genuine. "Deal." The meeting adjourned. Papers rustled, chairs slid back, and the machinery of corporate redemption began its slow turn. As I left the room, I passed Erin's old office. The door was open, desk stripped bare, monitor black. Her nameplate was gone, leaving only faint adhesive residue on the frosted glass, a ghost outline where certainty used to live. Zoya caught me near the elevators. "It's official," she whispered. "They've named you interim director of compliance." I blinked once, letting it settle. "Interim?" "For now," she said with a smile. "But everyone knows what that means." "Temporary permanence," I murmured. She grinned. "Exactly." The elevator chimed open. As I stepped inside, the reflection in the mirrored wall caught my eye. Calm, unshaken, composed. Not victorious, just steady. The kind of woman who'd been underestimated too long to need celebration now. When the doors closed, I took a slow breath and whispered to the empty space. Not revenge. Correction. Outside, the building gleamed in late afternoon light, tall and immaculate, its walls built on paperwork, clauses, and the thin, sharp lines between right and wrong. Erin had tried to rewrite the rules, but she forgot the first principle of compliance, the one I'd written myself. Every action leaves a record, and now, hers would live there forever. A week later, my badge opened every door again. The turnstile light blinked green, as if nothing had happened, as if 4 years of quiet denial, 4 months of erasure, and 1 unlawful firing had all been a clerical hiccup in a perfectly functioning system. But buildings remember. So do people. The office felt different now, the hush that comes after a storm, when everyone's learned to walk softer. Eyes followed me in passing, not with fear, but recognition. Some smiled, small, cautious smiles of relief, the kind employees give to someone who proved the system can still work if you hold it to its own words. Erin's office had been reassigned already. The glass plaque now read, Compliance Division, Director E. Marquez. The same letters she once tried to erase. I stood in the doorway for a long time that morning, watching the sunlight crawl across the desk. The surface was bare, except for the plant I'd rescued from my apartment window. Green, resilient, still leaning toward light. Zoya brought coffee without asking. "Feels poetic," she said, setting it down beside me. "More procedural than poetic," I replied, half smiling. She laughed softly. "Same thing, in your world." She wasn't wrong. I spent the next hours doing what I've always done best, writing. Not memos or defenses this time, but reforms. The first document on my new letterhead read, Subject, Compliance Restructure, Governance Renewal 1.0. Objective, to ensure no employee at any level can be terminated or disciplined without documented review and dual authorization. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rewriting a policy I'd once believed was bulletproof. But I'd learned something through all of it. Even the strongest systems rot when good people stop checking the locks. By noon, legal had approved my draft. By end of day, it went live in the internal portal, version controlled, permanently archived under my name. When the confirmation ping landed in my inbox, I sat back, letting the moment breathe. The entire company, 3,000 employees across 5 countries, would now operate under the protection of a clause born out of my own near erasure. Sometimes justice doesn't roar, it updates. Later that evening, Marcus, the CEO, stopped by unannounced. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, his usual composure tinged with something almost human. "I read your new policy," he said. "It's precise." "I don't write poetry," I said. He smiled faintly. "You write permanence. We need that." "Permanence is an illusion," I replied. "Documentation isn't." He chuckled, nodded, and left without another word. After he was gone, I opened my email drafts, the ones I'd written late at night when I thought I'd never set foot here again. Letters unsent to HR, to friends, to no one in particular. I deleted them all, one by one. Closure doesn't need witnesses. Before shutting down my computer, I opened the document library one last time and found it. The policy that started everything. Termination Procedure 8.2, last modified today. Author, Lena Marquez. Status, active. I hovered over the file name, then added one final note to the metadata footer. Revised to reflect ethical compliance and author accountability. There was poetry in that line after all. Quiet, understated, dangerous. As the office emptied, I walked the corridor where I'd once carried that box out of Aaron's office. The same path, reversed. My heels made no sound this time. The carpet felt softer, lighter, like it had forgiven something. Through the glass walls, I could see people working, unaware that their job security now lived inside a single clause I had rewritten at my kitchen table. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt restored. Justice isn't loud. It's cumulative. It builds, line by line, until it becomes structure, something strong enough to hold up truth. At the elevator, I paused, taking one last look at the office floor. Aaron's name no longer on any directory. My initials printed quietly at the bottom of every policy. When the doors slid shut, my reflection merged with the gold of the setting sun outside. Calm. Whole. And as the elevator descended, I whispered to myself, not as victory, but as record. Policies protect those who understand them. A sentence I'd written once in training materials, now carved somewhere deeper, beyond pages and contracts. Because in the end, the company didn't change me. I changed the company. And for the first time in years, the system finally followed its own rules.